Okay, we're going to get started. I call this meeting to order of the CARES Act Allocation Committee at Thursday, December 16th, 2020, the time being 3:05. I am Chairman Jared Sanchez. Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Press,
Here.
Kenyon,
Here.
Martin,
Here.
Molina,
Molina present.
Shepro,
Present.
Surges.
Present.
Bitches, you're good.
Okay, and if I could have an approval of the minutes for December 10th, 2020.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Frost, seconded by Mr. Shepro. Oh, and also for December 3rd. It's not here printed on the agenda, but we did forego.
So moved.
December 10th and December 3rd.
So
Mr.
seconded.
Frost moves, Mr. Shepro seconds. Any discussion, adjustments? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Fraz,
Here. Or yes.
Kenyon,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Molina,
Molina, yes.
Shepro,
Yes.
Surges.
Sturgis, yes.
Yeses.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes?
Sturgis here. Just for clarity, it is printed on the agenda that I'm seeing on screen.
Yes, you are correct. I think the one I have is just the unrevised one.
Okay, I just don't want somebody to look at this later and say, how did you do, it's all good. Thanks.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Surges. Okay, for public comment, we do have one person that I know of that has signed up to speak and one other perhaps. So we'll start with the one that has signed up, Dr. Ryan Deniz or Deniz. Do not know how to pronounce. Is Dr. Ryan on the line? I don't see him in person.
I don't see him on the line.
Okay. Well, Dr. Ryan, if you're there, you're unmuted, or maybe you're on your YouTube. If you get back into the call before we get well underway with our conversations, just chime in. Any other requests to speak? Mr. Shulman, were you going to deliver any comments today? Okay. Nobody else in the audience? Anyone else online? All right, that's it for the public comment portion. Let's move on to discussion items. Under item A, discussion on balance of funds. We'll have a little update from the treasurer and maybe finance. Is Ms. Brady on? Oh, she's in person. Ms. Carolyn Brady, treasurer's office.
Good morning, Chairman Sanchez and committee members. The status is about the same as it was last week when we talked. We still have about 43 million. Uh-oh. Thank you, Roger. The status is still 43 million. We are through round 7, which included a couple municipalities, fire protection. Few checks, we still have a few checks remaining. I have emailed them earlier this week and reminded them again. Besides, Fabiola did email them also. We have the Dundee Township, Village of Burlington, Park Districts, and Hampshire Fire Department. Mr. Shepro asked about fire protection. Last week, we cut 5 checks to 5 fire protections. I understand there's more rounds coming, and I didn't know that at the time I answered Mr. Shepro.
Thank you.
Do you have a total of the interest that we've accrued to date?
I didn't break it out separately. It's probably around 100,000.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any questions for Ms. Brady?
Maybe this is for you, Mr. Chairman. Is the interest on the money considered part of the money, or is that separate from and not subject to the same restrictions?
It's subject to the same restrictions. It has to be utilized and spoken for at the very least by December 30th.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, moving on. Mr. Onzik, do you have anything that you wanted to include?
I don't have anything formal to share with you, but I would just like to let you know that I did reach out to the various departments and offices and ask if they knew of any funds that were not going to be fully expended by December 30th that they had been allocated, or vice versa, if there was anything more than they had spent over and above their allocation. So just the end result of that is it looks like we actually have overspent our allocation. So at this point, it doesn't look like there's anything that we would be required to give back. So I just wanted to assure you of at least that much, and I'll still need to look at it more closely to determine how much we possibly may be overspent, to know how much, if there are additional CARES Act funds available that could be applied to that overage.
Thank you.
Okay.
What are the consequences of overspending
Shepro,
if there's?
do you have a
Oh,
question?
I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. What are the consequences of overspending if we just have to make it up out of other funds?
It would depend on where the overage occurred, and this, we would need to, it's going to take several weeks to determine the exact amounts and where they are. But if it's something that could be absorbed by their normal budget, then that would certainly be the first place we would go. And then there are also savings from the payroll reimbursement from the CARES Act funds that some of them are being used to offset the revenue reductions in fiscal year 20. Some of it's being used to offset the revenue reductions related to the pandemic that are expected to continue into 2021. And then there's a portion of it that would still remain that could then be applied to any overages or expenses that would be incurred in 2021 that are still related to the pandemic. So we do have funds. It's roughly around 6 million, I would say, that are available for other needs as we move forward, including covering any overages this year.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee or other board members and staff? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Onsick. Discussion item B, status of funds and funds available for current distribution. We do have Roger, you're not Roger. Blair, can you pull up the KEB recommendation? So I will ask Ms. Fabiola Guzman to approach the mic and just kind of lead us in this conversation. I wanted to pull this up because this was relevant to this discussion item. Ms. Guzman?
So currently, right now, all of the application pools have been nearly oversubscribed. The only one that's still pending that has not met, that has eligible expenses that have not been allocated are the fire protection districts. That's a little over $1 million. As we work through the programs right now, small business has $1.5 million to give back to the contingency. That might change as we finalize our review. We're trying to get this done by Friday of this week so that we can, if possible, make that adjustment before the COB meeting and then not have to come back and approve any small businesses under round one. As far as potential for additional funds to be available, there's almost $370,000 that is still pending for the small businesses. That 370, if they don't submit their supporting documents or they just don't engage the program anymore, that money can be returned to the contingency, but we won't know that until the first couple of weeks in January of where that money will go. If they submit supporting documents, then we'll send them a check. If they don't, then, we'll reel it back into the contingency. Really, right now, it's more a matter of getting those supporting documents back from everybody. Nonprofits right now, we have some that submitted. There's about 10 of them that have not. 4 of those were just approved on at the last county board meeting. That's Hesed House, Lazarus, Valley Industrial, and Northern Illinois Food Bank. So their requests went out and this week, and they're due on Friday. So we're hoping to cut them a check as well, subsequent to the state's attorney review. We have 13 in the queue right now to be processed for payment. Hopefully, we can get those out next week. I'm not sure if they'll be able to come in before the Christmas break, but at least on the 28th, they should be there.
Excellent. And we had put on the agenda here for us the KEB recommendations regarding when certain things have to be spent. And so there is a bit of a, maybe I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but there is a confusion about the December 30th timeline and what is due on that date and what is due after that date. So you can see here, if you could scroll down a little bit, Blair. This was sent out to everyone, so you can read this on your own time. I'm not going to read it out to you a little bit more.
Thank you. Yes, we asked KB for recommendations regarding the deadline to incur obligations and really what that means under the regulations. So you have up there the top part of
No,
that
that was the
memo.
wrong. That was the wrong one. I realized. This is the Treasury guidance. That's where we're at with the KEB.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Treasury
I'm
guidance.
sorry for.
That was my fault.
That's okay. So as you can see, basically for the county's expenses, we need to incur them, meaning we have to order them, receive them, and pay for them prior to December 30th. If we're talking about a third party, so the example would be a small business, we need to enter into agreement with them for a certain dollar amount by December 30th. So that would be our incurring the obligation to the third party. So that was that type of timeline. I know you received another handout regarding administrative expenses. They have opined that administrative expenses could still be incurred after December 30th because there's necessary expenses to close up the program, to finish the administration and close up the program.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of questions about what we're going to do. And today, a big topic of conversation is going to be, what do we do with all the extra unused money that we have? We want to try and spend every dollar. So it's important that this be in the background of that conversation, because everyone thinks, well, the checks have to go out and be cashed by December 30th, and that's not true. The checks can go out well after December 30th, up to 3 months after. But the expenses that they're asking reimbursement for have to be completed by December 30th, and we have to enter a contractual agreement, signed paperwork by December 30th. So that's just to help clear up any confusion that might still be lingering out there. Do we have anything else on that, Michelle, on that point?
I don't think so, unless anyone has any questions.
Does anyone have any questions for the state's attorney's office on status of funds? Okay, let's move on to the application process, time frame. The not-for-profits were reviewed this week. Funding agreements are going out next week. Fabiola, do you have anything to add to that general summary?
No, it's basically as we get them in, we process them. It takes the consultant, when we do a large mass review, about a week to return it back. But because they're individual ones, they can flip it in about 2 days. So as we get them, I process them, send them off to the state's attorney for final review. And then once we get everything back, we send it out to the treasurer and to finance to cut checks.
Where are we at on the smaller units of local government?
Smaller units are trickling in.
They're coming in now.
They're coming in. So I have about 7 that are being reviewed right now by the state's attorney. So once those come back as ready to proceed, then we can cut them some checks next week.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, so we discussed the obligated and incurred issue. Another thing that has come up that is relevant to our time frame. I know Mr. Shulman is here. He had asked last week about considering Aurora University for funding, given if we have some unused funds. And I think it's a great idea. And talking with staff yesterday, the problem that was repeated is that we don't have enough time. By the time we can get the authorization to set up some kind of program like that to be approved by county board next week, we won't have enough time to get the applications and process everything and be ready by December 30th. And we're also not going to have an exact figure of how much unused funds we have. There have been some other requests, but Aurora University is a large one. I would love to be able to hand the money out, but if we had another month, I know there are many here who believe we're even 2 months behind when we started. I would be generous and say we're only a month behind, but we just don't have that month. If we had another month, we could take all the unused money we have as the programs close out, and we can come up with a great way to spend every single dollar that will make everyone happy. Unfortunately, there are 8 spinning plates that each of our staff members are trying to balance and juggle at the same time right now. And they're really working around the clock. And we're just, by the time we would get a new application in, especially for a larger entity, it would be after January before we could even open the document. So, Mr. Martin.
Well, and as a comment, if I interpreted
Microphone.
correctly, if our existing programs are on the verge of being oversubscribed, it kind of answers the question. We've already committed to certain programs, and if we have more demand than we have assigned resources, making certain we meet that seems, at least with my thought, would be a priority before we start looking to other places.
Yeah, and I wanted to bring it up for discussion as consideration of an option to use, but especially given the recommendations by KEB and discussions and conversations with staff and understanding the actual behind the scenes process of how the applications are being reviewed and how much work actually goes into it. We're going to have to take a more simple path for any unused funds that we have. Okay, Mr. Frost.
No, I agree. I think we should, and I brought this up a few meetings back, but we got the holidays looming and the end of the year looming. So I think we should all agree that have a place to sweep those funds, and I'm open for staff advice. But personally, if the round 2 business has been oversubscribed, I think that would be the best recipient, where we can get direct aid right into the community real quick. We already have everything in place.
Are there any other questions or comments under this discussion item?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Shepro?
Yeah, is there any benefit to having potentially one last county board meeting at the 11th hour to authorize anything that would come up right at the deadline?
Well, we do have one next Monday, and we're hoping to get everything covered by then. We're gonna get the groundwork started today, and any adjustments that need to be made by Monday will be made. And then we're also going to discuss in a moment the possibility of authorizing the CAT committee to make funding agreements after the next county board meeting. So we'll get into that in a moment. That will definitely come up, Mr. Shepro.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next item, timing of distributions. Madam Chair.
Just for a point of clarification, so all expenses have to be incurred by December 30th, correct?
Mm-hmm.
It is my understanding that the grants can be distributed after December 30th in 21?
Mm-hmm.
That's correct.
Yeah, the checks can go out well after, up to 3 months after
No,
December 30th.
I'm not talking about the checks, I'm talking about the application itself.
The applications for the grants? Well, they have to be in. I mean, I believe the round 2 was closed for the business grants were closed today, I believe. So do you want to add something?
Yes,
to that?
so we need to have a fully vetted application and an agreement in place with the applicant in order for us to pay out that money. So that also needs to be a consideration for the round 2, that if they are not able to fully vet and enter into contracts with all of those applicants, that money that's not allocated needs to come back into the contingency as well.
But is that the due date all approved by December 30th?
Entered in an obligation, so we need to enter into a contract with that applicant.
Okay.
So for the county, it's easier because it's an incurred cost directly to us, but to the applicant, we need to have that contract in place.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, for timing distributions, there are no strict timelines because staff is reviewing all of the applications and all of the programs as fast as they can. They're working around the clock. I feel bad when I have to call them and send them emails, but that's part of the job. So everyone's doing what they can to just get this done. So there are no hard dates for some of these things, because I know I've gotten a lot of correspondences from people asking, oh, when is this check coming out? When will I hear back? And you'll soon is my answer. In Jamaica, I believe they say soon come, man. So that everything is happening. That's all I do know for sure.
Jared, I got a question.
Mr. Frost.
I'm kind of on that issue. The number one call I get, and I think Cliff has had the same experience, and maybe other members of the committee or board members, is, some of these applicants applied back in November, and I know it sounds easy, like, here's my applications, where's my check? And there's a lot more to it, and the devil's in the details, and I appreciate all that. But, I've just, ever since we started down this process, I've had the and you just mentioned working around the clock. I just have felt that, our 2 or 3 person staff, whatever it is overwhelmed. And when I brought up getting some extra help, they seem somewhat offended. But, I keep getting calls as recently as today that, I'm trying to find out what's going on. Nobody calls me back. And then, last week we talked about funneling everything through you. And I got to believe the volume is more than you can handle from a cell phone.
I've got a couple calls from people you sent my way.
Yeah. So, I guess I just want to point that out. I know we're closing in on the finish line, but we're still weeks away. And I just feel like there's a missing component, as far as being able to people to be able to call up. Most of them are worried that I haven't heard, did I forget something? Am I out? So we got to get a list together and maybe we could put something online where they could check the status of their permit and, or their application. I was working on a building permit today, their application, and that would maybe, once it was set up, at least the staff could update it and not have to take all those calls. But I just got to say that it's been a missing component throughout this process.
Well, I will say this, the previous iteration of this committee had to operate in a certain manner, given the conditions in the context that it was operating under. Now it's a little bit different, but we're at the end. We're at the end of the program now. So it is something that I have brought up with our staff, trying to get a little more help in, just to see whatever we can do to, have a little more feedback going, responses going out to applicants and things like that. I do believe, did we get somebody from state's attorney, like extra administrative help?
Yeah,
Michelle?
we have people trying to go through, the databases and pulling out information. Scott Berger's department has been very helpful in reaching out in terms of contacting applicants and trying to get them to submit data from the first, or, the necessary documents for the first program. So in addition to the second program, they're also helping us with that. We have state's attorney's office people trying to, get this through. Fabiola sent out many emails with specific documents required. People have been contacted numerous times. KEB has added additional staff, not only to take on the new programs, but to review the first round of business applications too. So everything's been ramping up over the last few weeks in terms of trying to push all of this through. And so we're just, we are definitely throwing resources at it. It is a lot, and it's, at some point, you get people, it takes more time to train people than it is to, it takes time away from what you're actually doing. So, but we are bringing in a lot of different resources. And I said, people have been reached by phone, or at least have contact has been attempted by phone to help them get stuff in.
Yeah, I guess, I know we have Scott's office in Batavia, your office, Fabiola, I don't even know where she works out of, and others. So it's we got these spread out resources all working towards a common goal. And I know this, we had this money thrown at us, thankfully thrown at us, but, we're trying to get this done, and it's unique and it's never happened before. But I guess as a board member, my job is to, represent people And right now, I'm just getting a lot of calls people are nervous. Their businesses are on the verge of collapse and they're just wondering what's going on. And a lot of them are just afraid that, they haven't heard, so they're assuming it's not going to come. So if there's any way of putting out something, especially if it was online, it would take the phone calls away and people could at least see that, their application pending, no further information needed. That's all it would take. So that's my recommendation.
Thank you. And I would say to all the applicants out there in the general public, this isn't the program, this isn't how we would have wanted it to evolve and to play out necessarily, where we're really scrambling and overworked, I would say. But it's the way that it had to be given, like I said, the kind of environment that this committee had to work in previously. So I would ask for patience and maybe a little forgiveness for people that are upset. I definitely understand the need is great for any money that's coming out. I have been telling people, if you haven't heard anything, it's not a bad sign. So just know that if you haven't heard anything, that just means they haven't gotten to your application yet. And once they do, they'll notify you of anything else that needs to be done. If there's a possibility where we could put something on the website, we'll make it happen. But under the time restraints we have right now, it's probably not likely to happen. Going forward, though, I know this doesn't apply and doesn't really help anybody right now, but going forward, if we get another round of CARES Act money or whatever they call it then, we are going to have a vehicle that is ready to go to do this program in the way that we would have wanted to at the beginning. It'll run very smooth. We'll have plenty of time to do all the things that we need to do, and everyone will get an email back within the day. I'm not going to promise that. I'm just saying it, though.
I wish I could give you those two months back, but I can't. So thank you.
Just one more month would be great. But Mr. Shepro.
Yeah, I admit, maybe this still isn't the right time, and we don't have to decide it today, but it does strike me that given Mr. Fraz's concerns and Madam Chair's comments, is that we ought to at least think about the fact that if we can help people by having a meeting at the last possible day, we should all be prepared to do that. And obviously that can be scheduled, but obviously if people are being overworked and swamped, it would seem that every day you could give them additional would be critical in helping something else get to the finish line.
I agree. And thank you. We will have another CAT committee meeting before the end of the year and the closeout of this program, or the beginning of the closeout. So yeah, look for that. But are there any other comments or questions in regards to this topic? Okay, moving on, there is something I wanted to bring up and just kind of get a sense of what the committee would prefer and that we could pass on as just a request. We have checks for municipalities or smaller units of government. They're very large checks that are cut and ready to be picked up. We're going to have anywhere from 200 to 500 small business grant checks that are going to be going out in the next month or so. And so some of the conversation has been around, well, do we want them to have to pick all those checks up, or would we rather mail them out? We've already looked at the possibility of doing a direct ACH transfer. It is way too much work to input all of these new people into the system and to get that done for just a one-time payment. So we have them in as temporary vendors in our system, which means it has to be a paper check. So I started the conversation with the treasurer and some of his staff, and I haven't really had a chance much to go back to it. So I'm not exactly sure where the conversation is right now, but I just wanted to bring it up with you guys and see what are your thoughts about having all of the business grant acceptees come in to pick up the checks as opposed to just mailing them out. Would you guys prefer that they be mailed out? And again, we have to keep in mind the context of internal controls means the treasurer's office controls that. The treasurer determines will they be picked up or mailed out. So we can only, if at best, just pass along our request if we were to want to do something different. So I'll open up the floor to any thoughts on that subject. Mr. Fraz, and then Mr. Surgis.
Yeah, no, I would be in favor of mailing them out. I mean, by the time you call somebody, they show up, you give it, it's going to take a little bit shorter, but I mean, mail is going to take 3 or 4 days. But, you know, the bigger thing is then you don't have to deal with who are you? Can you prove that you're the owner of this business? And secondly, it's going to eliminate the problems with 500 people walking in our door here with all the COVID issues we have going on. So I'd be in favor of a simple checks in the mail.
In my dual role as chairman of this committee and then also public health committee, it is definitely relevant in my head to try and at least reduce the number of people that we have coming into our offices, especially with such tight hallways and things like that. A couple of concerns that were raised, well, we have to get those checks out by December 30th, they have to be spent. Well, that's not true. We know now Treasury guidance says the obligations have to be signed by December 30th. Checks can go out well afterwards. I think they're not even gonna start going out until the second week of January, first or second week of January. So that's not a concern. Another concern though is, well, what if the checks get lost in the mail? And my understanding is that does happen in organizations that send checks out. Checks do get lost. When that is identified, checks are stopped, a new one is reissued, and maybe they have to come pick it up then, something along those lines. But to be able to steal someone's check and actually cash it and to commit that level of fraud for $20,000, it's very sophisticated and it seems unlikely to occur. So just
Mr.
a
Chairman?
couple of things I wanted to put out there. Hold on, Mr. Shepro. I recognized Mr.
sorry.
Sturgis next simply
Yeah.
because he had.
Yes, yeah, no, I apologize.
Mr. Sturgis?
Chairman Sanchez, this is probably far-fetched, but as an elected official, I am happy to pick up any checks that are within my district and deliver those, as soon as they are available. So I'm just throwing that out there.
Oh, we appreciate you wanting to help out. If you want to do that, you just have to get in touch with those units of government, those applicants, and they have to put you on the list and verify that with Fabiola, and then you would be able to come pick up a check. So there's a little bit of process, some emails and paperwork, but it is possible.
Happy
Mr.
to do
Martin?
I don't want to seem charlatan in my the way I address this, but why not just mail it? We mail stuff all the time. I don't even know. I don't personally feel like it's worthy of a lot of concern. If we get the, let's just pick a date. If we will have some date that we know we can get this out. And what I'm kind of reading between the lines here is it's probably sometime in January. Is that right? When we'll have the.
I have checks ready to go out next week.
Well, but I mean, my point is,
Between
throw
now
them in
and
the mail, and if they get lost, they get lost, and we stop payment, and we do it. I mean, we mail stuff all day.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, and so I wanted to bring this up simply when I spoke with Mr. Treasurer Rickert last, he had expressed his concerns about, possibilities of checks being lost and making sure they get out on time. But he said he would be willing to oblige. We would just need to direct State's Attorney Fabiola Guzman to ask him to do so. So I wanted to bring that instead of just trying to be the guy that says, hey, Fabiola, go ask him to do this. What does the committee think about it? And then we can direct Fabiola to ask Mr. Rickert if he would consider this change.
well, and if I
Mr.
could just
Chairman?
add an addendum to
Sorry.
that, to my point, Cliff said he would pick them up and deliver them. To me, now we've got another step. If they all go in the mail,
Mhm.
it's done. There's no middleman.
Mhm.
Cliff doesn't have any responsibility, and the mail is quick. I mean, it's 3-4 days, and they're going to have this.
Mhm. Well, even with the holidays being what they are, sometimes
I
mail
just-
goes a little bit slow. It's still going to get there, and they're going to have their money. And
Well,
be
anyway,
ready to
I
cash
made
it.
my point. I think we ought to just throw them in the mail and
Yeah.
have that be.
Well, considering that Mr. Sturgis volunteered to pick up checks, maybe we can have him sign up for all of our people receiving
Yeah, that'd
checks,
be
and then
fine.
he can just drop them off like Santa Claus. How's that sound, Mr. Sturgis?
You should see me in a red suit. I'm just saying.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Shepro.
Well, first, I'm probably the only board member who's big enough to be Santa Claus, but my question just is, how many checks do we think there will be?
Up to 500?
Yeah,
And
I
we're
mean, I
talking
think-
just small business grant
Yeah,
checks, so
but I mean,
nothing large.
I think that answers the question about whether we want all those people to have to
Mhm.
queue up outside and
Mhm.
wait to have their ID vetted and everything. I'm with Mr. Martin's suggestion. The check is in the mail.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on this item before we move on?
Do we
So-
just need to ask the treasurer to do that instead of what he's doing?
Well, I'm going to ask right now for a consensus of the committee to ask Ms. Guzman to send a request to Mr. Rickard, and obviously internal controls being what they are, he can deny it. That's fine. I wanted it to be a collective effort. If this is something we're going to do to ask for, then I want to make sure everyone's on board with it. Madam Chair.
Could we possibly, I understand that there's quite a few checks, but would it be possible to email those applicants who's receiving funding, letting them know that the check is in the mail so they know to look for it?
If we were to mail them out,
Correct.
I don't know.
Yes, so when they have funds being dispersed, they get an email with their either IGA or now a funding agreement letting them know it's ready for pickup at, Thursday after 9 o'clock. So they will get some notice. So if it goes via mail, then it'd be the same email, but expect 3 to 5 days before it arrives.
Yeah,
Thank you.
excellent. Thank you.
Do you need a motion or just a consensus?
Just a
that
general
you should-
consensus. Yeah, I don't even know that we have to call the roll. I'll just assume we have consensus unless I hear anyone speak in the negative right now. Nobody? Okay, well, that's settled. So again, it's up to Treasurer Rickard, but now we have the consensus of the committee to pass it on to Ms. Guzman to ask if we can just mail out only the small business checks though, because the larger checks, people can come pick those up. There are only a few of them, they'll be able to take care of that. But okay, moving on. Discussion item E was actually an accidental duplication, so ignore that. We'll move on to discussion item F, the status of the OCR programs, and that would be Mr. Berger. Scott, are you on the line?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Can.
All right. So just prior to your meeting, we distributed an Excel document to you by email. Those of you who have your devices in front of you can maybe open that document. You'll notice there are 2 tabs in that email. The first tab captures a log of the business applicants that we have, the applications we have received. Just a reminder, we launched this application cycle on Thursday, the 19th of November. We did close the portal, as you made reference earlier, Chairman Sanchez, in the meeting. We closed the portal around noon today simply because of the volume of applications that have come in. You'll see on the spreadsheet that we've received a total of 378 applications.
Scott, we're pulling up the spreadsheet right now. If you could just give us 1 second.
Absolutely.
So that everybody can see this. So this did just go out this afternoon. So you can take a look at it, especially if you have business grant applicants or you yourself are an applicant. You can check out the status of it. Okay, so we have it up on the screen, Scott, if you can please continue. Sorry for the interruption.
Okay, so absolutely. So you'll see that we're giving you some basic information about the applicant, including the queue number that they've been assigned based on the date and time of their submission. Just a sidebar note, because Zoom Grants is a West Coast-based firm, all of the times you see here are expressed in Pacific time. So a 12:23 submittal, actually occurred our time 2:23. You can see the amount they've requested and the community that they are located in. You'll note that several of the applicants have gone far above the $25,000 cap that you gave us to work within per application. So when you adjust the total accordingly, because our office will not be issuing award amounts to businesses in excess of $25,000 per county board directive. When you make an adjustment to these numbers, the 10.4, what's the number here? 10.448 million total actually drops by nearly $2 million. And just a reminder, currently you've allocated just over $6.2 million for this program. So currently our staff is reviewing the applications and working with KEB to verify all the eligibility issues. We have 2 weeks to issue obligations, commitments, and we are beginning that process now. Our intention is to fully obligate the $6.2 million between now and the 30th. And we would expect that perhaps no disbursements will be made yet this month. At the point that we are in processing this program, I would expect that we'll turn our attention to dispersing funds in January, and that may go into February as well. Obviously, there's a lot of back and forth with the applicants, a lot of communication. Josh Beck and our staff of 5 have been working on these applications. Josh has fielded nearly 400 calls personally, responded to emails. You'll recall that we established a special email for this program and dedicated a phone line to it. So we're trying our best to be responsive to the applicant pool, answer their questions, get the information that they need. And that's where we are with the business grant program. I also have a short update for you regarding the cultural institution grant program, as we have titled it.
Okay, yeah, go ahead and give that update, and then I'll ask for any question or comment.
All right. So the last program in your portfolio of CRF activities is what we're calling the Cultural Institution Grant Program. And this is a 3-part category. It includes historical societies and museums, performing and visual arts centers, as well as, per recent board directive, amusement venues. So we did launch this application portal last Friday afternoon. We directly notified some 30 organizations that we felt we could preliminarily determine would likely be eligible and interested in this initiative. So we reached out directly to them. We also shared that notice with you, the board members, as well as a long list of municipal officials and employees up and down the Fox Valley and out to the western townships. We've gathered quite a lot of contact information from cities and villages and asked for them to help us get the word out and cover the landscape and make sure we don't miss any potential applicant in the community. Additionally, Karen Zilli in our office has been following up with the organizations that we identified, fielding phone calls and answering questions, offering assistance to applicants. As you can see in the spreadsheet, as of about an hour ago, we had received 6 applications. They are from a combination of amusement venues as well as performing/visual arts centers. Those applicants are eligible for up to $100,000 per year guidelines. And as you can see in column F of the spreadsheet, no applicant has exceeded that cap. So provided that their expenses are eligible, these will be moving on to a commitment status as well. Just a reminder, you've allocated a total of $1.25 million for all 3 categories within this initiative: historical societies and museums, performing visual arts centers, and amusement venues. That concludes my report. Any questions?
Questions for Mr. Berger on these programs? None here. Any online? Okay, thank you, Scott. So you said, well, I already know there is 1.25 million is what we allotted for this program. Right now, we're looking at about 467,000. So the rest of it will go back into contingency. Is that the idea?
My intention is to continue to accept applications. The portal is open right now, and we have many applicants working on their applications. We'll be encouraging them to submit as soon as possible. I will be obligating funds to those entities up to the maximum amounts that you have authorized me to, up to the 30th of December. If you want me to stop short at some point and report to you whether or not I have a surplus of unobligated funds, I need you to tell me what that date and time is so that I can give you that information.
Well, it does seem that giving everyone until December 30th to apply does not give you guys enough time to go through their application within that 24-hour period. Is that correct? Someone were to apply on the 30th, you don't have time to go through that all that day?
In theory, we would.
In theory.
In theory. I mean, we have staff working into the evening, over the weekends. I've authorized overtime for folks. So I'm hopeful that the target audience will respond quickly. and not drag this out to the 30th. And, our staff can certainly communicate and chide these applicants along to submission status.
Well, given what you're seeing on your end, the workflow, the day-to-day, do you have a recommendation for a cutoff date on this program that you would prefer to see?
I think if I would, this is off the cuff suggestion, but if you take any action, I suppose I would suggest that you consider authorizing my office to move surplus funds from this category into the business category.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were to authorize my office to make such a decision on your behalf, then I would be prepared to make that decision in the last few hours of the grant period, which ends midnight on the 30th. I doubt that will happen, but
well, the only concern I have, the only concern I have there is if we wait until the 30th, would we have the time to move that money over to business programs and then be obligated with those updated amounts on December 30th?
So let me just let you know that an obligation consists of preparing a funding agreement, getting the applicant to sign that agreement, and then I will co-sign that agreement, and that agreement constitutes an obligation. So, not to make it sound too easy here, but that can be done in a matter of hours. So, I don't know if you're asking me to set a deadline. I can.
Well, no,
certainly do
basically I'm
that.
asking if it comes down to December 30th, you have excess funds in a program, you want to move it into the business round 2, the funding agreements that were already signed off on, would those then just be simply adjusted with no further authorization needed, like as far as the dollar amount? So if somebody got
No.
25,000, but they have 10,000 more eligible expenses, you wanted to give them 10,000 extra dollars, do you just?
No, let me clarify. I am not asking you to increase your grant cap for these entities.
Mm-hmm.
So you've given me a $25,000 cap per business. You've given me a $25,000 cap per historical society or history museum. And you've given me a $100,000 cap for performing and visual arts centers and amusement venues. I'm not asking to exceed that cap. What I'm suggesting you consider is giving my office the authority to move unobligated money between now and the 30th from the cultural institution category, that would be the 1.25 million that you've allocated, over to the round 2 business category. As you can see from the spreadsheet that I've given you, there's a line of businesses in that queue that I will not be able to serve.
Okay.
Because I'm going through that list. Our office is going through that list in chronological order. So the people at the bottom of that list are it's highly unlikely they're going to receive any obligation of funds, any allocation or award.
Okay, so if we allocate extra unused funds into other round 2 applicants, they would already be in the system and ready to go. So we wouldn't worry about any deadline issues then on the 30th. That's all I'm worried about.
Right. So what I'm suggesting is that if you were to authorize my office to make a decision about shifting part of the 1.25 million from cultural institutions because of lack of demand, lack of applicants.
Mm-hmm.
I'm certainly not suggesting that any eligible applicants in that category be denied funding and that the funds be reallocated. In the event that program is not fully subscribed, I'm suggesting that you authorize my office to make that decision in the last week of the year to move those unallocated, unawarded funds over to the business category.
Okay.
I'm asking for maximum flexibility, basically.
Mr. Frost?
Scott, is that the only category, cultural institutions, where there would be excess funds, or would you like a motion made to allocate any unused funds into the round 2 business grants?
Well, I'm just speaking about the funds you've allocated to my office to manage.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what other funds it sounds like Mr. Onzik indicated there really are no surplus funds anywhere.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
I guess I'd be happy to make a motion after discussion here that we allocate any unused funds to the Round 2 business program, give staff the flexibility to apply them as needed.
We're going to craft some resolutions here in a minute. Mr. Martin.
Yeah, Mike and I were talking, that we would need a resolution, would we not? Because we're changing the number, but if we move this forward today, we could have that resolution at next week's meeting and put the matter to bed
Yes.
that way. So I mean, if he made a motion, I will second it. Assuming that we will have an appropriate resolution before the board for its final approval.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and the idea today is we'll have a resolution, at least one resolution that'll come out today. What are we going to do with any unused funds? And just starting that general picture, and any changes that need to be made between today and Monday, updated numbers, updated figures, we can make those changes next week at the county board meeting. But we could definitely include this concept into that resolution.
Okay, and is the statement that we've been making here correct? That we will not have excess funds, but for the areas that Scott's office is administering, that we're oversubscribed?
I don't have the exact number because I had a number that I was working on, and then just before the meeting, I spoke with Mr. Onzik, and that number has changed. We do have unused funds. I do believe there is a little bit from municipal. There are some from round 1 of the business program, correct, Fabiola?
There's 1.5 right now that's available.
1.5 million. And it's still 195 in municipal that was unspoken for, or is that not changed?
That's already been absorbed.
That got absorbed. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, so we do have some excess funds. We'll get into that in a minute because, that's one of those moving targets that we're all trying to hone in on.
This
right
motion,
now.
to be magnificently redundant, just pertains to the 2 funds that that Scott's office is administering.
Yes.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
I would like to consider making sure that we have a hard stop for this to allow Scott a couple of days to process. I would like to suggest that December 28th, that is a Monday, that all not-for-profit grant applications have to be in, giving him then 2 days to be able to finalize and obligate any of the additional monies.
Scott, did you hear that? Would you be comfortable with that? Putting that
Absolutely,
deadline?
that's fine. Yes, that will work just fine.
Would that be the will of the committee?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Shepro?
Yeah, my question is it sufficient to authorize staff, or do we have to indicate a particular staff member such as Mr. Berger as the individual who would make that determination?
Scott, do you have an answer for that?
I believe
Michelle.
the original resolution, I would defer to the state's attorney's office on the legal matter, but I know the original resolution that commanded my office to set up these programs specifically said that I or my designee is authorized to enter into obligations and funding commitments on behalf of the county. So I would suggest
So
the
this
same.
would parallel that language then?
That's what I would suggest, yes.
Yeah, we'll refresh our memories on that, but it would be our recommendation to appoint the executive director, Scott, or his designee to execute those agreements.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Tepe?
can I ask a question and maybe make a suggestion? Since the objective is to make sure that all of these funds are distributed within the county, and that, there still may be some instances where funds end up becoming available that haven't necessarily been allocated. One of the sheets that you passed out was the municipality sheet, which showed that some $9 million was eligible but not awarded. Could we not enter into agreements with some of these municipalities saying if funds became available, we would fund you to some extent?
Yeah, so we're going to be covering that momentarily. That'll be part of the conversation of what do we do with any money we have left over when we have to figure that out between today and Monday. Any other questions or comments on this particular issue of the OCR programs?
I got one
Mr.
question.
Frost?
Just, we talked about mailing the checks, and I think we were all in agreement, and that was a good thing. And when it comes to the grant applicants, I guess this is maybe for Scott or the state's attorney, there's actually a signing by both parties, so that brings a whole lot of people face to face. So Scott or state's attorney, whoever, are we prepared to do that? And for 500 people, it's going to be a pretty big operation.
We've been utilizing DocuSign,
Okay.
which is an electronic signature program.
Okay. So that
And
was,
yes, I can say that we do accept electronic signatures on our documents as well. Our agreement has a provision that actually recognizes that a faxed signature, an emailed signature, a scanned document that's emailed is all considered as if original.
great. That takes care of another big exposure situation. Thank you.
Yeah, and to be, full picture, Treasurer Rickard did inform me, they are following every COVID precaution that they can in their office, and if needed, they could process up to 100 people a day. So we do know that they're at least doing their part in trying to limit that. But again, that raises the question, do we want up to 100 people coming through and all the contact that comes along with that? So yes, thank you for your additional comment on the matter.
Chairman Sanchez, Sturgis here.
Mr. Sturgis, are you speaking with us?
Yes,
Okay.
You know what, I'm wondering, while I'm in favor of being expeditious with this with Scott, is there some way that can be a joint decision between maybe Jarrett as committee chair and Scott Berger as our designee, that they could just agree on that together to move it forward rather than just Scott alone?
Well, it would first have to come from the committee and the county board.
No, he's asking for permission in the 11th hour or the 11th hour and 59 minutes to move this from here to there.
Yeah.
And rather than having to bring it through to committee, it just is expeditious, just for him to give you a call and just say, hey, this is what we're doing, and between the two of you authorize it. This way we have someone from the electorate and not, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, my understanding is that I cannot direct that. I cannot provide that authorization, and it has to come from the committee and I believe the full county board. Is that correct, Ms. Neerman?
We were trying to brainstorm some different options of delegating authority. I think since the county board acts on a committee structure, what we would recommend if you were inclined to hold a meeting on December 28th, for example, to have authority delegated to the CAC committee to make those last minute adjustments to allocations and approvals.
Mr. Chairman?
And then also to Mr. Berger for his
And
programs,
yeah,
for transferring
absolutely.
money.
So we can do it'll be a couple different resolutions, but yes.
So that we would want to see those resolutions at the county board next Monday.
Yes, and if
plan.
you'd like us to draft those, we will have those, and then we'll circulate those by this weekend, so that you can take a look at them prior to Monday.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Shepro?
My suggestion would be, is this committee could adjourn from day to day and convene when action is needed. But each day you adjourned, if you didn't have a quorum, it would just go to your next date that you would specify.
Yeah, so we want to make sure that we have all proper authorizations in place to perform any actions necessary by December 30th. Does that answer your question?
Well, mine wasn't really a question, it was a suggestion. As another way of achieving the issue of, who's authorized to do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know we have the next county board meeting next Monday and then potentially another CAC meeting on the 28th. So we'll see what we can get done by then. Okay, any other comments or questions? Mr. Martin, you almost look like you're ready to say something. No? just thinking.
Call the question?
Well, we don't have anything up for a vote, but we are going to move on to the next discussion.
I thought there was a motion and a second. I apologize.
No, just talk of a motion in second, but that'll be coming up shortly. So the next item, G, additional county department expenses. So this is the big moving target. This is where we get into what are we going to do with any unused expenses, unused funds. We labeled it additional county expenses because about a week ago, it was looking like that's where we should start. Let's see what other county departments are going to have some expenses that they may need CARES Act money for. And looking primarily at public health and the sheriff's office. Well, so this is all in major flux right now because about 2 hours ago, I was aware of the public health committee or the public health department is going to be giving back about $1.1 million dollars of their full ask, just simply because they couldn't meet certain deadlines for many of their contractual services to be performed by December 30th. So there's that money coming back. The sheriff informed that one of the large vehicles that he had requested at a price tag of about $630,000 will not be able to be delivered on time. So that money is going to be coming back to us. So there's a couple figures right now that we're aware of. And then obviously Ms. Guzman informed us about 4 million extra in round one, somewhere around there. 1.5 million extra. Mr. Onzik, we asked the other question, as he brought up earlier, what other eligible expenses do county departments have? Based on the recommendations from and the update of the Treasury guidance from KEB and their explanation of it, their interpretation of it, we know that we can cover this month's payroll for the county, the reimbursable payroll, which we weren't planning on before because we thought we had to have the money out by December 30th. But now that we know it just has to be incurred, that the people have to have performed their work by December 30th. We now have about 1.1 or $1.2 million in payroll that we can take extra money and put into. Then, like I said, things changed about an hour and a half ago, and there were some updates from IT that actually, we might have some other things that we need money for. And we need a little more time to go through that and make sure it's not IT that's purchasing things for other departments, and we're actually increasing the amount on paper that we need to move around for county expenses. So we don't have an exact figure today of what other expenses are going to be coming from our county departments, but it's looking like outside of the payroll expenses, there shouldn't be too much more coming from our county departments, like public health. We have the vaccines coming in. They're probably going to need a little extra money for that stuff, but it's only the things that they can do by December 30th. So we don't know where that number is going to come in yet. We have to wait to see what is inside of all the things that IT is requesting. So unfortunately, today I was hoping to have a more solid figure for everyone about how much of the unused coronavirus relief funds we will have available. If you guys have a rough number based on that most previous conversation with Isaac Onzik, and I'm looking at Michelle Neerman, Fabiola Guzman, but again, this is really recent information that sort of changed the figures.
Right. Right now, the situation is very fluid. Let's just say information is pouring in. So Joe Onzik and I discussed before this meeting that we would try to get our heads together tomorrow and Friday to try to sort through the numbers and work that into some of the suggested resolutions for allocation and whatnot. We do know we have preliminary estimates from KEB, for example, that with the addition of the 3 new programs under OCR, they need a budget of approximately $123,000 to complete that review. So that's a little bit in flux. We do have an amount to be determined for closeout expenses. We're still waiting from the federal government to give us guidelines on what's required for closeout. So it's a little difficult to project what those costs are. We are extending the contract of the program administrator, Fabiola Guzman, in our office to accommodate the extensions of the program and the closeout period. So there is a lot. I know IT probably has had informed Mr. Onzik it could be over $1 million of possible eligible expenses that have already been incurred. So it is a moving target, but we can sit down with Mr. Onzik and staff and sort through that and get a good, as best of a handle as we can prior to Monday.
Yeah, every conversation I've had with staff on this, I think you just see things spinning. That's just all it is. Everyone's trying to figure out all these moving things and these timelines and deadlines that we have. So it is very complex. And unfortunately, again, I'm sorry that we don't have a better figure right now. But what we do want to come up with today in this conversation can just lead directly into crafting the resolution, and then we'll deal with the other resolutions we have before us. We want to at least, we could just make a pretend figure, $3.3 million we have unused. Where do we want that money to go? What buckets do we want to put them in? I'll get to you in just a moment, Mr. Martin. We have the recommendation from KEB. Pull that up. So KEB gave their recommendations about what we should do with the money. If you go down to the bottom, all the way to the bottom. And it's pretty straightforward. It looks just like the conversations I've been having about what we could be doing with this. So the first being municipalities, any that are oversubscribed, Aurora and Elgin in particular have a lot more eligible expenses that could be covered if they only had more money. Other units of local government, mostly that I believe is only fire protection districts. There are fire protection districts that also have a lot of eligible expenses that have not been allocated to them. And then the third on the list, we have county departments for payroll and non-payroll. My understanding is these are not given in an order of importance, of suggested importance, unless there's something you guys know that I don't.
No, there's no level of importance. We simply asked them what would be really the simplest and in terms of processing applications very quickly in terms of what we could identify as eligible expenses. And this is what they gave us, that, municipalities and other units of local government, we already have the figures of what are eligible expenses. Kane County departments, payroll and non-payroll, Joe's working with everyone to try to figure all that out. But those seemed like the lowest hanging fruit that could be easily gathered. And so it wasn't, I think you could also consider the small businesses, et cetera. It's just that these were readily identifiable.
Yeah, so these are the ones that we already know we have fully vetted their submissions. We know they have more eligible expenses that can be covered. With the small businesses, I would imagine the reason it didn't make the list is because, well, all the money could be sucked up in those three first, but the other being there might not be that much knowledge of some of these businesses about eligible expenses and precise amounts. So KEB recommended that we don't do a sort of general resolution where we say, oh, if we have some extra money, then it goes to this. And once that's used up, then it goes to this, kind of a flow like that. They would prefer that we have more specific dollar amounts being allotted to specific candidates. Being that we don't have specific numbers, we're just going to have to play pretend on that today and use, let's say, $3.3 million or $3 million as our draft number. Where do we want that to go? That's what we need to determine today moving forward, so that on Monday we can have updated figures and any other information that came in between now and then that is relevant, that can be discussed and amending the resolution we create today. Mr. Martin?
Well, I was trying to do the arithmetic as we went through this, and it with what we had, with the numbers that we discussed today, it would appear that we're talking about like a 1.3 million. Is that crazy?
1.5 right now, which with the possibility.
Well, we've got 1.5, and then we've got 600 that's coming from another source. I was scratching as I went. So we started with $1.5 million, then we had 600, then we had $1.4 million. That brought us to $3.5 million. The payroll that we can put in for this month is $1.2 million. That took us down to $2.3 million available. And then there was mention, I think, made at the end that there's some estimate that we might have another $1 million worth of over expenditures in the county, which would then take us down to 1.3 million. And I know that this number isn't accurate.
Yeah.
But based on today's, but it's not like we've got 10 million.
No.
To deal with here. And my one thought is that I don't want to lose track of how this was composed in the beginning. The money that we gave to municipalities was based on a per capita amount. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but if we have municipalities that have oversubscribed, we have to decide that, well, fine, we'll let that municipality get a higher per capita amount than the ones that came in with the exact amount. And I'm not saying this is any value judgment, but we did have a standard that determined that number that we might want to keep consistent. I think with fire protection districts, if I remember correctly, it was more, tell us what you need and we're going to try to do it. Was that not it, that we established, because we had much vaguer, we didn't have as the same arithmetic ability to dole money out to fire protection districts because of the different manner in which they operate and form and exist. So it would, if we said we were going to meet, and I think I remember hearing it said, you ask us for what you want and we're going to try to do it. So if we said fire protection districts, and then, let's not forget the county, if we've got other stuff in here. I mean, we're pretty close to home. So I don't want to, we had 92 million bucks and now we're going to be down to a little over $1 million that we're trying to apportion. But if we, I just want to make sure that we don't forget the way that the conversation began so that we're consistent at the end with the method we applied in the beginning.
Yeah, no, it's very relevant to this conversation because we have to figure out if we're going to send it to fire protection districts or municipalities, what's the equitable way of doing that? Is it in line with our original intentions when we established these categories? That's what you're saying, essentially.
Well, and I'm going to guess that some municipalities had more expenses, but if they were entitled to pick a number out of the blue, if they were entitled to $2,500,000, all they did was come in with $2,500,000 because that absorbed their entire allotment. And
Well,
maybe
so I do know there are municipalities that ask for a lot more than that.
Yes. So what happened with that applicant pool was for those that threw everything at us, they had the larger amounts in the tens of millions. And some of them only had X amount of dollars. So they did only provide X amount of dollars of eligible supports. So not everybody submitted equally, but those allocations we reviewed up to whatever dollar amount was allocated to them.
So, and I don't want to dominate, but that would mean then if we want to cover our own audit, we need to have distributed this money based upon standards that, at least if I understood Fabiola's last comment, if we only have substantiation up to the amount of money that they were paid and they had a higher demand, we don't have substantiation for that, so we can't protect ourselves from the future of that audit because we don't have any basis for making the distribution. So my gut tells me if that fire protection districts and the county may be our safest way of proceeding. And I hadn't even thought about the fact that we might not have substantiation for the higher amounts that the municipalities provided, but we can't just send the money because they said they had it. And we don't have time left at this juncture to reapply and start reviewing.
My understanding with the municipalities, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that a large amount of their submissions were in eligible payroll, so that even if we haven't gone over their figures, we already know if they're going to check out. Is that
Correct. That spreadsheet that was provided to you were eligible expenses that they had, but because they only had X amount of dollars in an allocation, we stopped we just gave them a check for that amount of money. That was the concern as well with the municipalities, is that payroll was not defined yet in the Treasury guidelines, but once it was, they threw it all at us.
Yeah, I remember there were a lot of revisions of applications once they had the final say from the Treasury guidance. So we do know, even if we haven't gone over those payroll documents from municipalities, we do know that
Those 10 million,
Yeah.
they're eligible.
they're eligible.
Yes. The only thing
Does
is,
that address your concern on that?
I just don't want to, I don't want to make a last distribution and then find out
Yeah,
we
have to give it back
we were
or take it
short
back.
substance and have to give it back. That's not.
Yeah.
and also Michelle pointed out, is the fire protection districts only had 1.35 million allocated to them, but they had over $6 million worth of actual eligible supports. So that 1 million overage is an eligible expense. We would just need to amend their IGAs and get a resolution all in place before the 30th to make it happen. So that's another route as well that we could
So
go.
basically, if we're looking at $1.5 million to play with, let's say, that the municipal applications, that will suck it up right away. It's gone. If we send it just to municipal, it's taken care of. It's a big number. So you said, so we're looking at maybe 14 million of eligible expenses not allocated so far between fire
10
protection.
million for the municipalities that are eligible, not allocated. The fire protection districts had a little over $1 million that are eligible, but were not allocated because they only had 1.35 to start with. And then the final CAC decision was to fund them at 83% of that eligible request.
Okay, so a sizable chunk of money can be absorbed just by those two programs. Madam
Mr.
Chair,
Chairman,
I'll get to you next, Mr. Shepro.
Perhaps we should also include a budget amount, at least an estimated budget amount for closing out the CAC funds. I don't know if that has been put in that budget line because from what I heard from the state's attorney, that's a moving target. They don't know what those costs are going to be yet, those administrative costs. So we should factor in some of that money, whatever that may be, out of that pool of money that's available.
And we're going to go over that also today. So hopefully it won't take too long to get there. But yeah, because that's also a consideration, how much money we're predicting, we're estimating we're going to need for administrative services going forward between now and September 30th, I think is the final deadline for giving all of our paperwork to the federal government. So we're going to, between now and Monday, ideally have a more precise estimate figure on that one, how much the administrative costs are, or do we don't have that today, precise?
We have costs up to December 30th.
Up to the 30th, right?
To process the additional OCR program. The actual closeout, it's still up in the air because we don't have very defined guidelines from the Treasury as far as what we're going to have to report back to them.
Yeah, so we're going to try and put together a figure on that. So that's sort of in the background, knowing there's going to be some money. We put aside, I think, 600,000 for administrative costs, and so far we have spent around 300,000.
We're almost at, we have 400 for the consultant, and we have, I had a figure here, I thought I had it handy, but we are a little under 200 on the actual consultant fees right now with the last one that was paid. So we're slowly inching up there, and with the new 3 programs that rolled out, we will make that 300,000 mark.
Yeah. So using up all of that, whatever else we need for administrative costs, we have to have a little carve out for that estimated cost. And then the rest is up to us. So we have payroll we can put some into, and then these other issues. Kenyon, did you raise your hand?
I raised mine, but I
Yeah,
guess.
Mr. Shepro, go ahead.
My understanding was that in the case of the fire districts, many of them put in for all their payroll costs and others elected not to overreach in that fashion. I'm not sure about the municipalities. I would be concerned that somebody got rewarded for, say, asking for more than other people felt entitled to. Because clearly, if everybody had asked for all their payroll, it would have been oversubscribed across the board.
Yeah, and this relates to my earlier comments, where if we had another month even to kind of close out some of these programs and then go back over things and say, okay, what can we do with this money? Then maybe we would have time to come back to some of these fire protection districts and say, hey, do you have any other expenses that you would like to send to us that you didn't because you cut yourself off at the allocation amount? So this is not going to be a perfect program. We're trying to just make as many people as happy as we can, knowing we're not going to please them all. So there is that possibility that a fire protection district could have submitted for more, and then now because they didn't, they wouldn't be eligible for any unused funds. Well, they wouldn't be considered for any unused funds. So it is an unfortunate possibility, but at this time, I don't see any way that we can really go through all these angles and try and make concessions for them.
So as I understand it, are we considering sweeping into any of a pot of municipalities, fire protection districts, not businesses and others as well? The list seems to be growing, I guess is my question.
Well, the main list as given to us by KEB is right here on the screen: municipalities, other units of government, and payroll, county costs. We can include into that, the idea of business grants that weren't awarded because there was no money left. So that's another consideration we have for where unused funds can be. That gets a little trickier though, simply because of the timelines that we have in front of us. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at.
I'm a little nervous about reopening all these categories. I think staff's put them to bed, and then all of a sudden we're going to go back and look at municipalities.
Right, I agree.
Fire districts. I personally, I would like to look at the payroll number that Madam Chairman mentioned and small business and keep it simple.
I lean with Drew.
So you guys would recommend to first go into any extra small business applications that are eligible?
Yeah, I would say take care of the one county need and then go
first and then
county first,
look at businesses.
All the balance goes into small business. Because the neat thing about small business, and we all know it's coming to a head. I mean, these people have hung on as long as they can, and it's just going to come to a head over the next month. And what I like about that is it goes out throughout the entire county. It goes to, employees, employers, suppliers, everything. So it's a nice way to evenly send out the remaining funds.
I think that's a great idea.
I agree with Mr. Fraz and Mr. Martin.
Mr. Kenyon, you would also agree with that?
Business is so very important.
But starting,
Without them, we won't have a very, very good society.
but you would agree with starting with county expenses first?
And we have a lot of expenses too.
That is actually the
Can't be
easiest.
bankrupt.
Yeah. But the county side of things is actually easier because it's internal. So if we're going to move money there, it's already taken care of. We're good on that. That is the easiest way to use to spend the unused money. I think probably the most complicated way would be the small businesses, but that's probably the most relevant to us as representatives of districts that have voters in them that own businesses and things. We want to try and see that they can hopefully stay open. So Ms. Molina, Mr. Shepro, Mr. Surgis, do any of you have anything that you would like to add to this conversation? Do you have any different opinions on priorities we should establish for unused funds?
Burgess here.
Go ahead.
I'll go after Surges.
I'm just afraid to say anything or John Martin's going to yell at me again. So
Have some courage, man.
Just be careful.
I just agree. I just agree with what Mr. Fraz and Mr. Martin said about the priority, and that's my view.
Ms. Molina?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I think long-term forecasting, it makes more sense for us to use as much of the money that's left as possible to pay our own payroll. And that would kind of free up, maybe, hopefully, funds in 2021 to continue to support our small businesses in a way that maybe is a little bit less restrictive, because we would be creating our own rules versus the rules that the federal government gave us. So that would be kind of my overall idea.
Okay.
Not necessarily a relevant consideration, but within the last few hours, it appears that they may actually be getting close to a further agreement in Washington, so.
Yeah, if we get another round, it'll be
Yeah.
a little bit of a different rodeo, but.
Yes.
Okay, so based on this conversation, it seems the will of this committee would be to recommend that we start off spending any unused coronavirus relief funds on county side expenses, payroll and non-payroll. And then from there, seek to put money into round 2 business applicants that were not able to be given money because they didn't make the cutoff of the amount of money we had. Sorry, my words are not as concise as I'd like them to be right now, but.
So I assume that would, like Madam Chairman mentioned, I think it was 1.1 million. So
I think it's 1.3.
1.3. So you said non-payroll. So I guess I'm getting a little nervous.
Well, we have county expenses that are payroll and non-payroll.
Yeah.
If it's non-payroll, it's something that would already have to be fully vetted, and we know it's going to be
Okay,
performed
that's
and
what I want to
delivered
make
by
sure
December
that there's
30th. So,
some new great
yeah,
idea.
it's payroll is the only thing I know of, but we keep talking about it as payroll and non-payroll
Thank
for all
you.
the county expenses.
So yeah, that surmises, I think, what we're all
Mhm.
talking about.
Just in case there is still money left over, a third category that we would want to prioritize any unused funds. Yeah, I can't imagine we're going to have anything left.
That's for the committee party when we're done.
I like the sound of that. Be there, so.
Can't even have a decent party these days.
What's that?
I just joked. I said you can't even have a decent party these days.
No kidding. Social distance party, all right. Okay, well, I would then ask for, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit in the agenda, I apologize, but I would ask for a motion to recommend to the county board that any unused funds be allocated first to county expenses, eligible expenses, and second to business grant applicants. I know we wanted to have a firm number. KEB wants us to have a firm number. We just don't have that today. So is that even relevant? Can we just put blank spaces there for amounts that can be filled in later?
I'll make that motion.
Okay.
I'll second
Oz
it.
moves. Mr. Shepro seconds. Okay, any further discussion? And first, I would like to invite Ms. Neerman and Ms. Guzman, if there are is there anything that we missed in this conversation so far that you think needs to be a part of it for our consideration?
If you want to include a direction to the SAO and the finance department to work together to come up with suggested figures to add to the resolutions, that would be great. And then the only other thing would be if we need to do some adjustment afterwards, and this might be, it would be a different resolution probably, or it could be included in the same one, to delegate authority to the CAC to do any cleanup work on December 28th or the week of December 28th. I'm sorry, I'm kind of piling on there, but.
And it's okay. We can pile on whatever we need to this one. It's all going to the same thing. So,
That's acceptable to the seconder.
Mr. Fraz, would that be acceptable to you as well as the motioner? Okay, so adding on those recommendations from the state's attorney's office. I don't think there was anything else. Fabiola, do you have any? I feel like we're missing something that we wanted to include on this, but.
No, right now, no, because even the program's administrative costs would be under non-payroll, or we can include that in the resolution. So I'll try to get some numbers from KEB. But again, we don't have anything concrete from the Treasury yet. And who
Okay.
knows what might change in the next few hours too.
So you'd still need something to deal with Mr. Berger's authority with respect to, I'm sorry, to Mr. Berger's authority with respect to the business grants, or is that covered?
Well, that was covered under what you had included, Michelle, the authorization.
I'm sorry, I guess I interpreted the current motion to include all monies, including that under the first program and under the OCR programs. Was that the intent of the motion?
Well, my understanding is it's to cover all these programs. So
My understanding, though, was that the authority with respect to continuing to process the business grants is different from the transfer of the unused funds.
But can we include that all into one resolution, Ms. Neerman?
We could, yes, we could, in terms of if there are any remaining allocations to be made, that the CAC is delegated the authority to make those allocations and approvals of additional grants and/or reimbursements, or however you want to characterize it.
But then also the authorization for Mr. Berger to move funds. Do we want that in this resolution as well?
If you don't, if the intent was to separate out the monies available, then yes. So if you want to keep the OCR monies within the OCR programs, then yes, that would be a separate category that we would need to create a delegation.
Yeah, and essentially we would have to, if we want to give money to the second round businesses, that's Scott, that's OCR. So he needs authorization to be able to
That would
do
be
what needs to be
correct.
done with the money without having to come back to the full board.
That would be correct.
Seems to me
we wouldn't
those are
need a
two separate thoughts.
Yes, so from what I understand it, the program number one, the original set of programs, the money left over from that would be, we would work on with Joe Anzik, our office, in terms of drafting a resolution to use unused funds, unallocated funds, unapproved funds, to first go to county payroll and non-payroll expenses, and then second to the OCR small business program. Then there would be a second item for any programs left over from the cultural, or the OCR cultural program, to authorize the executive director of OCR to move those funds and use them to award business grants under the OCR program. So he would have actually two potential pots of money going into the OCR program. And then we would, on the third aspect of it, we would need a delegation of authority to the CAC committee to approve any other additional allocations or approvals necessary that basically we haven't thought of, just a catch-all. If that sounds correct. The only other thing I can think of, and we could put this as a separate resolution, is to authorize a potential amendment of the KEB contract to include additional expenses for the second grouping of the OCR programs plus closeout costs. And then let me check my notes to see if there was something else.
Yeah, because I want to make sure this resolution is as complete and valid going forward as
Could we
possible.
ask Mr. Berger if the authority, as was described by Ms. Neerman, is what he feels is all he needs?
Yes, I believe it is.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Berger.
And then if you just want to give us some flexibility to divide that up into more than one resolution, if that makes sense, that would be great.
Can we do that here today to create another resolution, even though we don't have any documentation for it or anything on the agenda?
Yeah, if you just want to make a motion to direct us to draft resolutions
For next Monday.
to enact those directions, we will do that for consideration at the special county board meeting on Monday.
Could I suggest, I would feel more comfortable if we did 2 or 3 separate motions, because there are just so many different thoughts here.
Yes, I think that would be helpful.
Okay. Well, yeah, and that could take a little pressure off this resolution. It's a bit
Yeah.
squeezed. So with this, what we're really primarily looking for is what to do, the prioritization of unused funds. So we have that. These other considerations, should we then separate them into different resolutions that can be put on for Monday? Would that be more advisable, Ms. Neerman?
So what I think you could include in one resolution, in one now therefore clause, basically saying that the program monies left over from the first set of programs will be allocated first to county payroll expenses and then to small business program number 2 under OCR.
Mm-hmm.
And that the CAC committee is delegated the authority to make any additional allocations or approvals to carry out, basically that direction.
Okay, so that would be one resolution. Another separate resolution would be to authorize Scott Berger to make movements of money, to move money around as needed to supplement these programs as well.
That is correct.
And then a third resolution would be necessary for anything else?
Yeah.
Seems to be both resolutions could include the language the state's attorneys requested that would authorize them essentially to clean up the language.
Yes, in terms of the motion here at the committee.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be great.
This year,
And then
I
the
was-
third resolution would be, or the third motion would be to direct the SAO and Finance Committee to review the administrative budget for the CARES Act program and to determine whether or not any budget adjustments need to be made for basically review of the applications and for closeout activities. And the fourth one, I guess, would be to approve a contract amendment with KEB to expand the scope of their work to include review of applications under the OCR programs and for closeout activities.
Okay, so for today, we can address the issue of prioritizing the unused funds and authorizing the CAC committee to make take any actions necessary. Would that be sufficient for this one resolution then, and we can cover the other 3 on Monday?
What we would do is
think
draft
they'd
the
all have to-
resolutions that I just ran through there for consideration by the county board
Okay,
on Monday.
so we can at least forward the main one or would you want to wait?
I
mean, just
would forward all 4.
forward all 4 from today?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Shepro?
Yeah, there is a motion on the floor, but if I'm listening to all this, I think if we start with the first motion, we make a second motion, all of them are essentially directing the state's attorney to prepare appropriate resolutions. But I think we should just take them up one at a time and we'll go quickly, I think.
But normally that's
I-
how we would do it if we had these resolutions on the agenda. If whatever we're
Yeah.
doing today that's not on the agenda, I want to make sure we're all clear and, nothing ambiguous. So we have a motion on the floor, and I believe we did sort of amend it through agreement to include.
Can you read that back? Good luck.
Yeah. So we have our prioritizations, and then what was the other thing that we included? Was it the authorization for the CAC committee, correct? That's what you guys agreed to change?
The delegation of authority to the
Yeah, the
CAC.
delegate. Okay.
Mhm.
Yes.
So that's the amendment or the resolution that is before us right now.
Mr. Chairman,
Any-
Sturgis here.
Mr. Surges, go ahead.
I would, again, this is just me personally, I'd feel way more comfortable if in that 11th and a half hour, when Mr. Berger's making the decision to transfer, that's a decision that you sign off on as well.
We haven't gotten to that yet, though, right? This is still, as I understand it, the transfer of the excess funds first to the county payroll and then to that point.
Yes,
And
this
Ken,
is,
I must have heard that wrong and would ask for somebody to read it back.
yeah, no, it's okay. We're throwing a lot of stuff out here, so.
Read it all back.
Yeah, so this is the resolution to recommend to the county board that we prioritize any unused funds from the coronavirus relief fund to first county expenses, payroll, and if there are any eligible non-payroll expenses. Second, to the round 2 business applicants that weren't able to make the cut because the money had run out. And then in addition, to add authorization for the CAC committee to take any actions necessary to move this along. So that is the resolution before us.
Can I call a question on that?
You may. Clerk,
I
will you
will.
please call the roll?
Franz,
Yes.
Kenyon,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Molina,
Molina, yes.
Shepro,
Yes.
Surges.
Surges, yes.
Passes.
We got through it. All right.
Mr. Chairman,
Hold on one second, Mr. Shepro. Let's bring up the second.
well, that was what I was going to move is the second one, but okay.
Okay.
I'll defer.
Yeah, just slightly ahead of me. So I'll take
All right.
a motion for the next resolution, which would be authorizing Scott Berger and the Office of Community Reinvestment to move funds from programs, from one program to another. I don't know the right way to word this, but you understand the spirit of what we're getting at. So we have a motion by Mr. Shepro, second. Anyone? Mr. Martin? Any questions or comments on this?
How is this Surges here?
Hold on, Mr. Surges, hold on.
That's what Mr. Surges said.
Okay, Mr. Surges, you have been given permission to speak.
Part of that decision. The chair-
Yeah, how is that not what I was just discussing?
This motion is,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, this is
Fine.
authorizing Scott Berger to take any actions necessary. It
but I
doesn't
think
And
we
I would
already,
like to amend that to include Chairman Sanchez in that conversation or sign off or whatever the appropriate language is.
Okay, Michelle, is that needed, or, I understand what Mr. Surges is getting at, but is that something that we have to put into writing? Is that even something that I would be?
With delegation of authority, that's up to the county board. You'd like to have certain parameters set and, people you designate to sign off on it. So if the county board wants OCR in consultation with the chairman of the CAC committee to make that determination, that's perfectly fine. It's up to the board.
Would that be sufficient for you, Mr. Surges, to
Absolutely. I'm just
authorize
trying to keep it quick and clean.
Okay, so authorizing OCR to make these decisions in consultation with the CAC committee chairman, moved by.
Mr. Chairman, I would accept that as a amendment or revision to the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Shepro. Mr. Martin, you as well?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Mr. Kenyon?
Everything's fine.
Everything's good. We need more comments like that, Mike. All right. Anyone else have a question or comment in person or online? Seeing and hearing none. Clerk, could you please call, who was that?
No, that was me saying call the question, but you anticipated me. Sorry.
Mute him.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Franz,
Yes.
Kenyon,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Molina,
Molina, yes.
Shepro,
Shepro, yes.
Surges.
Surges, yes.
Passes.
Okay, and then we have a third resolution to consider, reviewing the administrative costs, giving instruction to review administrative costs. Can I please have a motion and a second to Mr. Franz? Mr. Kenyon seconds. Any questions, comments, additions, subtractions?
Just could you remind me what the general substance of that motion?
Ms. Neerman.
These would be increased costs associated with adding the OCR programs. They would be basically the consultants review by KB, and then also to review budget for closeout costs. So it would be KB as well as Fabiola Guzman's expenses and probably additional expenses by OCR, I imagine.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a live motion on the floor. Any other questions or comments? Seeing and hearing none, clerk, could you please call the roll?
Perez,
Yes.
Kenyon,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Molina,
Molina, yes.
Shepro,
Yes.
Sturgis.
Sturgis, yes.
Okay, and then the fourth resolution that was brought up in this conversation, it would be relating to KEB. I scribbled chicken scratch on here.
So moved.
Can't read my own notes. Bok, that's it. Okay.
To approve an amendment of a contract with KB to include additional services associated with the review of the OCR programs, as well as closeout expenses or closeout services.
So move.
So moved by Mr. Martin,
I'll second.
seconded by Mr. Kenyon. Any other
Question?
questions? Mr. Shepro?
Yeah, just Michelle, is this something that would be ready by the board meeting for action? The amendment, that is to say?
Yes, I believe we can do that, yes. We can
Thank
at
you.
least do the amendment with respect to the services required to review the OCR expense or OCR applications, the OCR program applications, because we have that estimate in.
And this is all part of the cleanup and administrative, right?
Well, actually, so we added, the board added all the new programs under the OCR's administration, but did not provide for KEB. So they've been working under the first contract, the overall contract, but we're going to go over budget, over the amount specified in that contract. So it's
I guess my question is, does that have to be finalized in detail by the 30th?
I think if you'd feel more comfortable, at least authorizing that amendment, because we are changing the scope of the services.
Yeah, I'm not
And part of
saying is there-
it is actually processing the applications. And it's not just the closeout costs.
Mhm. So, but it's administrative, but it's not necessarily closeout.
Correct.
Closeout plus.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. We have a motion on the floor. Any other questions or comments? Seeing and hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Perez,
Yes.
Kenyon,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Molina,
Molina, yes.
Shepro,
Yes.
Sturgis.
Sturgis, yes. Sorry.
Thank you.
Motion passes. Thank you all for bearing through all of that with me and us, because,
Thank you.
yeah, it's a lot, right?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We still have a couple more things to do, but they should go quickly. I apologize. Under discussion, there is one thing that I didn't remember to include in my notes to bring up. This can happen really quickly. If a business applied for a grant and they haven't gotten their money yet, they've gone through the process, but in that waiting period, they've closed, do we want to turn around and say, well, you're closed now, so you don't get the money? Or do we want to just, hey, if they're closed still, if they went out of business, they're still getting their money because at the time of the application, they were eligible. Now, keep in mind, if we are to turn around and say they can't, if they close their business now, they can't have the money, that would require staff to go through and verify each of these businesses to make sure that they are in fact open or closed, and then go through the process of saying, you don't get your grant money, but then that also means we're going to have unused funds. So I just wanted to bring it up because it is something that has come up. Mr. Martin?
I think we distribute the money We did a decent job at the outset, and if it changes, it can't be a significant percentage of what we're doing. And I think we need to recognize the reality of how detailed our review can be. And I think we just ought to let it rest.
Mr. Chairman,
Shepro.
I would refer to your comments a few moments ago and Mr. Martin's. I think this committee, before I got here and since, I think has done everything and more that could be done. And, there's always going to be something that you could have done. I think I agree with Mr. Martin, you leave it alone.
Yeah, I prefer not to share my opinion as chairman very often, but I would say if they went out of business, that they were eligible at the time that they applied, now they have a bunch of debt, at the very least, we can help them with that. It's still an eligible expense under the federal requirements. And now that business that was hoping for a lifeline had to go out, well, they still get something. They're still taken care of and they're not just out $20,000 in debt that could have been covered. So, okay. Mr. Sturgis?
Yes, well, I totally understand the realities and urgencies of everything. I just want to remind the committee that that was not the intent as specifically discussed by this committee for a business that would be going out of business. It was meant to keep somebody that was up and running, to keep them up and running. And with that said, I realize I'm the minority on this, and I'm not trying to be a Scrooge. I'm just, those were the realities. So
yes, and that is a point well taken. And there is a reason we did that. And it was because we wanted to make sure we were going to help these businesses stay afloat if possible. We also thought this money was going to be going out a couple months ago. And so much time has gone on that now businesses that would have still been open. Yeah. So
Mr. Chairman.
Quickly, Mr. Shepard.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I understand Mr. Sturgis's point, but I think Mr. Martin's observation, now having to go through, what are we going to tell Mr. Berger and his people to do? Are you going to have to bring in a picture that you're in business on December 30th? I just think that's adding an additional burden on his staff to verify all this.
Commissioner Shepard, I concur.
No.
Yeah,
I concur on that, Commissioner.
Yeah, I could have assumed everyone's opinion on this, but we did need to bring it up, and I apologize I forgot during the discussion period. So moving on, we have a resolution that is on the agenda, actually. You can actually look at the title and probably read it online. Number 1, authorizing approval of additional applications of Coronavirus Relief Fund Program funding agreement with small businesses as of December 16, 2020 for distribution of CARES Act funding. Say that 3 times fast. Mr. Martin moves. Mr. Fraz seconds. This is really easy. We're just saying yes to a bunch of businesses that we want to give some money to. Any other conversation, discussion on it? Seeing, hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Fraz?
Yes.
Kenyon?
Yes.
Martin?
Yes.
Molina?
Molina, yes.
Shepro?
Yes.
Sturgis?
Sturgis, yes.
Passes.
Resolution passes. Thank you very much. We have one more. There's a sheet here that is in person, but it was also emailed to members of the committee at the very least, authorizing fiscal year 21 budget adjustment related to the 10-8-20 allocation. Can I get a motion in a second? Mr. Kenyon moves, Mr. Martin seconds. Brief description necessary? We're good. Everybody, this is a housekeeping thing. Any questions, comments? Seeing and hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Fraz?
Yes.
Kenyon? Yes. Martin?
Yes.
Molina?
Molina, yes.
Shepro?
Shepro, yes.
Sturgis?
Sturgis is gone.
He fell off the cliff.
No, he's muted.
Oh, that was fun. I'm trying to attack my thing. Yes, Sturgis, yes.
Thank you.
Good one, Mike. All right, that's
that
it.
Was not funny.
Well, somebody laughed. Okay, Mr. Kenyon.
If there's nothing else, I'd move we adjourn before we're into tomorrow.
My goal was to get done here by 5 o'clock, and we are 2 minutes under.
Man.
1 minute under. Dang, I shouldn't have said that. Motion by Mr. Kenyon to adjourn. Seconded by Mr. Fraz. All those in favor, say aye.
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 We are adjourned. Thank you guys for bearing with us through all that.